This is a compound carved into the Sierra Madre, and inside is where the most wanted drug lord alive is sleeping. Two governments have been hunting him for over a decade. The DEA has a $15 million bounty on his head, one of the largest in the history of American law enforcement. The CIA has drones in the sky above his country. Interpol knows his name. And yet, for years, this man has been a ghost. Fewer than 3 confirmed photographs of him exist. His name is Nemesio Ruben Oseguera Cervantes. The world knows him as El Mencho, but here's what makes this terrifying. Mexican Army Special Forces are already moving into position around his compound. By sunrise, he will be wounded and bleeding inside a military aircraft. By nightfall, 6 Mexican states will be on fire. How did a 5th grade dropout from a village with no roads build a $50 billion narco empire that stretched across 40 countries and all 50 American states? And why did the man who evaded every intelligence agency on Earth for over a decade die not in a prison cell, not in a shootout, but somewhere in the sky above the mountains he once ruled? But to understand how this ends, you have to understand where it begins. In 1966, in a village called Aguililla, a boy was born into a family of avocado farmers among 5 brothers. No money, no school, past the 5th grade. By the time he was 14, he wasn't picking avocados anymore. He was guarding marijuana fields in the mountains above his village. Sometime before his 20th birthday, Nemesio crossed the border illegally into the United States. He ended up in San Francisco. In May of 1986, the San Francisco Police Department arrested him for the first time. A young man in a blue hoodie, scowling into the camera. That photograph is one of only a handful that will ever be taken of him. And he was deported, but he came back. Then he served 3 years at a federal facility in Big Spring, Texas, a prison that primarily houses undocumented immigrants. And when he was released, he was deported to Mexico for the final time. He was 30 years old. He had a federal drug conviction. He had nothing. And then he became a police officer. This is not a metaphor. After returning to Mexico, Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes joined the municipal police force in Jalisco. How a man with a U.S. drug conviction obtained a badge in Mexico is a question no one has adequately answered, but it didn't last. At some point in the late 1990s, he left the force, and he walked directly into the arms of the Mexican Cartel. And eventually, the Mexican Cartel fractured. One faction became Los Torcidos, and Nemesio led that one. And within months, he renamed it to CJNG, the Jalisco New Generation Cartel. What happened next was one of the fastest criminal expansions in modern history. Under El Mencho's command, the CJNG expanded across Mexico entirely. By 2018, the cartel had a presence in nearly every Mexican state except Sinaloa and the Golden Triangle, which gave them direct access to precursor chemicals from China for manufacturing methamphetamine and fentanyl. By 2019, the DEA estimated that the CJNG was responsible for at least 1/3 of all drugs entering the United States by air and sea. They had over 100 methamphetamine labs. Their annual revenue from cocaine alone was estimated at $8 billion, another $4.6 billion from crystal meth. But what truly set the CJNG apart was not its drugs, it was its violence. In 2015, the Mexican military launched a large-scale operation to capture El Mencho in Villa Purificación. Helicopters were deployed, special forces moved in, and as the military closed in on a CJNG convoy, cartel gunmen aimed a rocket-propelled grenade at an army helicopter and fired. The helicopter went down and 9 soldiers were killed. This is where El Mencho becomes something different from every other cartel boss in Mexican history. A drug cartel had shot down a military aircraft. The message was unmistakable, and El Mencho escaped that day. The DEA placed El Mencho on its most wanted list, and then he vanished. On February 20th, 2026, military intelligence caught the break they had been waiting over a decade for. Investigators had identified a trusted associate connected to one of El Mencho's romantic partners, a woman named Guadalupe Moreno Carrillo, who had reportedly been in a relationship with the cartel boss since 2018, after his separation from his wife Rosalinda. The associate escorted the woman to a property inside the Tapalpa Country Club. The woman spent Friday night at the compound. On Saturday, she left. But El Mencho stayed. He stayed with a small security detail and a cache of weapons that included high-caliber firearms and rocket launchers, identical to the model used to shoot down the military helicopter. The operation was planned on Saturday, February 21st. Ground forces, aviation support, and special operations units were assembled, waiting for confirmation. On the morning of Sunday, February 22nd, that confirmation came. El Mencho was still at the compound. The order was given. Ground units established a perimeter around the gated compound. Then the soldiers advanced on the property. What happened next was not an arrest. It was a battle. The moment the first troops approached, El Mencho's bodyguards opened fire with heavy weaponry. High-caliber rounds tore through the mountain air. The firefight was immediate, violent, and sustained. Several cartel members were killed in the initial exchange, but El Mencho was not among them. In the confusion, he and his inner circle broke from the compound and fled into the surrounding forest, a dense, wooded area dotted with cabins on the outskirts of Tapalpa. His bodyguards stayed behind to slow the advance, throwing themselves between the military and the fleeing boss. A team of Special Forces soldiers split from the main assault and pursued him into the trees. A second firefight erupted in the undergrowth. During the chase, a military helicopter providing aerial support was struck by gunfire. 3 soldiers were injured. The soldiers kept advancing. They pushed through the smoke, and then they found him, hiding in the undergrowth, wounded, alongside 2 of his bodyguards. El Mencho, the Phantom, the ghost of Jalisco, the most wanted man in the Western Hemisphere, had been shot. Military medics assessed his condition on the ground. He was critical. El Mencho never made it, but the war had already started on the ground. Within minutes of the operation, the CJNG activated what can only be described as a national contingency plan. The response was staggering. Across 20 Mexican states, CJNG operatives hijacked buses, cargo trucks, and civilian vehicles and set them ablaze to block highways. Fires erupted across the metropolitan area. More than 250 roadblocks were established across the country, with over 600 vehicles were stolen or destroyed, and Canadian Airlines canceled flights to Guadalajara and Puerto Vallarta. Over 1,000 tourists were stranded at the Guadalajara Zoo, sleeping in buses. State Department issued a shelter-in-place order for Americans across the region. In 6 separate coordinated attacks, CJNG gunmen killed 25 members of Mexico's National Guard. A prison official and an employee of the state prosecutor's office were also killed. In total, more than 60 people died in the 24 hours following El Mencho's death. The Mexican military responded by deploying 10,000 troops, and by nightfall on Monday, they tracked El Tuli to the small town of El Grulo. He tried to flee by car. A paratrooper rifle brigade caught him. He was killed in the shootout. Soldiers recovered long and short firearms and Mexican currency. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum appeared at a press conference and assured the public that the country was under control. She called the operation a success, but on social media, a different picture was emerging. Torched vehicles billowing black smoke against the Jalisco sky, armed men standing at roadblocks. The disconnect between the president's words and the images on every screen in Mexico became its own story. The empire El Mencho built did not fall with him. His son El Menchito is in a U.S. prison. The line of succession that El Mencho had spent years building was methodically destroyed by the arrests of his children. But the CJNG was never a family. It was a franchise. 40 years later, after the cartel empire he once built, his body was flown into Mexico City on a military aircraft, the most wanted man in the Western Hemisphere. A 5th grade dropout from a village with no roads. He died in the sky above the mountains he once ruled.